EXW or XWorks? Who uses XWorks? Why is there such a sigh of... Why? Okay. Okay.
I think he just thinks that everything is waived if he uses XWorks.
Okay. Hopefully, I can arm you with some information here that can change that. The majority of small businesses in the U.S., so don't think you're alone, use XWorks. Okay? Why? Why do you think that is? It really does. It really does cost them. They don't know. They just don't know.
There's no responsibility.
Right? They just don't understand the risk that you're putting your company in when you use XWorks. And we'll go through this. The very top, if you turn the book and you read it like I'm reading it, the very top there it says XWorks parentheses name place of delivery. Very important. Very important. Even if you use XWorks. Denise, you're going to put XWorks South Loading Dock with your address. You might put XWorks North Building with your address. Okay? So there's still, people think that just because you put XWorks means that that's all it is. Technically, you still need to define where are you delivering that product to. So if that product gets damaged in packaging, you're still responsible for it. Okay? Because that product isn't at the south loading dock yet. Or that product isn't at your north building. It was deemed damaged in the packaging machine. Okay, see how that works? So make sure that there is still, even though it's XWorks, it needs to have a named place of delivery. Okay. On 273, the first column, let's look at the seller's responsibilities. Provide the goods, the commercial invoice, and other documentation as required by the sales contract. That's it. That's your biggest responsibility. Providing the goods, packaging also goes in there. Okay? So in all terms, sellers are always responsible for packaging the goods and commercial invoice. That's standard for all INCOterms. Licenses, security, and custom formalities. Yellow it out, circle that number 2, star it, whatever you need to do. But let me read it to you. The seller's responsibility is to provide the buyer at the buyer's risk and cost assistance in securing any license, documents, authorization, and security clearance required for the export of the goods. That is an oxymoron. It is not the buyer's risk. It is the seller's risk. I told you, you are always the U.S. PPI. The U.S. government is always coming back on you. Always. If you sell to a company in Mexico and you give them the opportunity to check the denied party list, and they look at it and say, yep, my name's on here, but I'm just not going to tell Dana about it. So that means I'm probably not going to file an AES. And if Dana doesn't have in her procedures that she doesn't release the commercial invoice without an ITN, okay, say you forgot, you don't have that. So you hand over all the commercial invoice and the bill of lading, and your shipment gets sent out to a denied party. And the government, the U.S. government, catches it. Who's responsible? Not coming to me, because I'm in Mexico. I'm having fun. I've made a nice profit. Okay? First of all, they're coming back and they're asking you, why didn't you have an ITN number? But ultimately, it wasn't your responsibility, because you gave up that responsibility when you chose to use XWorks. So Dana, by choosing XWorks, every time you do that, you put your company at risk of a minimum of $50,000 fine. Minimum. Okay? So then you could go back and you could say, okay, Mike, we're going to still use XWorks, and now International Fiber will file its own AES. And maybe you already do that. You do? Great. Do you have a power of attorney from your customer?
I don't think we do.
Okay. How are you filing on behalf of somebody else? Even though it's your product, even though you're being held responsible, but by using XWorks, you've given up that responsibility and right to do that. So if you're still filing the AES, the government can still come back on you and say, you don't have a power of attorney. You can't be filling in information for somebody else. That would be like me filling out an AES and not having a power of attorney for you. Exact same thing. So even though you think you're okay by filing your own AES, you're still putting your company at risk. Okay? Number 3, seller has no obligation to provide for carriage of goods or for insurance. Seller on delivery, you just make the product available at the named place of delivery. Okay? The The seller assumes all risk of loss or damage to the goods until they have made available to the buyer at the named place of delivery. So if it's at the south loading dock, that's where your risk ends, is at the south loading dock. Costs, pay all costs to the south loading dock. Notice to the buyer, you have to provide notice to the buyer that the product is ready.